everybody, it's Lily, and welcome to a segment I'm going to call Writing with Lily, where we do no actual writing, but we'll talk about it. So the subject of today's video is going to be something that I personally struggle with quite a bit, and that is motivation versus discipline, and what you need in order to actually write. I feel like on a lot of different forums and places where aspiring writers can get tips and tricks on where to write, they're always asking, how do I get motivated to write? And for me, it's not the motivation that's the problem. Getting started is easy. It's keeping going that's hard. Motivation is what gets you going. It's that kick in the pants, that spark under your butt, that gets you into your seat in front of your keyboard, or if you prefer to write by hand, in front of a piece of paper with a pen in your hand, and gets you jotting the words down. It's exciting. You have this new idea, or an old idea that you're finally deciding to act on, and you're ready to put the words down on the page. It's an exciting time. My novel actually started as a short story that I wrote for a creative writing class that I took in college. Everyone seemed to really like it, and my mom was actually the one who suggested that I go ahead and try to make it a novel. I had a good premise, nice characters, and it was something that I felt that I could expand on. I should probably tell you what I'm writing about. So I'm writing a fantasy novel for a young adult audience. I don't want to give away too many of the details, just because I'm pretty protective about my story. Not that I think that any of you would steal it or anything like that, but I really haven't talked about it with anyone outside of my family at this point. And that's mostly because if nothing ever comes of it, then I'm not really letting anyone down, except for myself, which probably could hurt just as much as letting anyone else down. I had also entered a contest during that creative writing class, and although I didn't win, my creative writing teacher, who was one of the judges, really inspired me and encouraged me to keep writing. So for me, that's where the motivation came from. The getting going was relatively easy. However, now that I'm 70,000 words in, it's the keeping going that's hard. So how do you keep going? It's a good question, and one that I'm not sure that I can answer, but I thought that I would share my musings with you here. I find that a lot of times when we hear stories from authors or writers of any sort, we always hear the stories of how they got this great inspiration and they spent the whole day writing. They wrote 20,000 words or whatever, which is an insane amount to write. And so for someone like me, I get very discouraged when I don't have days like that. I've never had a day like that, unless I had procrastinated on writing my 10-page story that was due for workshop, in which case I had no choice but to write and write and write until it was done. But that's a little different. I've never felt that feeling of, I need to write this story. I'm gonna sit here and write all day just to get the words out of me. For me, although I love my characters and I love my story, and it's not that I don't want my story to be told, I just find it very hard to sit down and write. Of course we hear about the stories of people writing huge amounts in a single day. That's what's exciting to tell people about. It's not exciting to tell people, I sat at my computer for an hour and a half staring at a blank page and wrote 2 words. Obviously you don't want to tell people that. It makes you feel like a failure. But you're not. You have to know that people all have to start somewhere. And even if you're struggling, at least you're trying. We all have to find that dedication, that discipline in order to keep ourselves going. It's just a matter of figuring out what it is. I think that writing the first draft of the first story or novel, maybe in a series, but with a new set of characters, can be particularly challenging because you don't know your characters yet. Or at least I don't. I don't have all of their quirks mapped out. I don't have all of their motivations mapped out. So I'm learning them as much as I am learning the story, which in a lot of ways goes hand in hand. I think some of this comes down to whether you're a plotter or not. For me, I always have told everyone that I'm what some might call a pantster. I don't really like to plot and outline. I just kind of want to start writing and see where the story takes me, where my characters want to go. And for short stories, that seems to work okay. When you have sort of a set amount of space in which to tell your story, it doesn't matter as much if the whole thing is completely planned out. However, when you write a novel, as I'm finding, you need to have a bit more of a plan as to where you're going. Maybe it doesn't have to be a strict plan, but you at least need to know the beginning, middle, and end. And it's something that I set out without knowing. I thought, you know what, I'll just see entirely where my characters take me. And I've found for myself personally that just doesn't work. So along the way, I've been finding that I have to stop and sort of plan the general gist of where I want my story to go. I now know my beginning, my middle, and my end. But how do I get from point A to point B and from B to C? What happens in between? I do still stick by the fact that I want my characters to take me where they will, but I think having some general plot points along the way is important, and it's something that I've found helps to be able to work towards something instead of just mindlessly and aimlessly wandering through the story. I think another factor that's causing me problems is that I'm writing fantasy, and although I love fantasy, it is a lot of work to write. I think that fiction is particularly hard because you're creating something out of nothing, especially something like fantasy or science fiction. These things, these worlds, these people, they don't exist anywhere except for your head. And so you as the author have to be able to pull those thoughts and ideas and words out of your head and put them on a page so that other people can understand what you're seeing, so that other people can get to know the characters like you know them, and as you're seeing them in your head. And I think that's really challenging. Not that I think that writing something more contemporary or set in the real world would be easy. I just think that in some ways when you're basing something off of places and things that already exist, it helps. You don't have to completely start from scratch and build your world. You already have something to base it off of, which is probably my own fault for choosing this kind of genre where I have to create my own world. But for me, that's part of the fun of it. I've just cut out more work for myself than if I had chosen something else. It's also why I think writing subsequent drafts also works a little bit faster. Sure, you're going back through and you're changing things and adding things and taking things out, but you can do that because you know your story, you know your characters, and you know what's consistent and what isn't. And I think that's where a lot of the excitement comes from. It's after that first draft is done. You know the story, you know the characters. Now you can go back and finesse it and figure out exactly what you want to say and how you want your characters to act. It gets hard when you've been working on this piece for months, years, and you don't feel like it's going to where it needs to go. And I think that's the hard thing about first drafts especially, is that it's hard to get from the beginning to the end. You might wander through, things might change, you might get completely stuck and get writer's block, and it gets difficult. And that's where discipline comes in. Discipline is writing on days where you don't feel like writing. It's setting yourself a schedule and sticking to it no matter what. And I don't mean you can't have a cheat day here or there where if it's just not flowing, you just let it go. Sometimes sitting there in front of a blank page is the worst thing you can do. It just makes you frustrated, you start to resent your project, and sometimes you just need to step away, and that's fine. And I say this as a person who has stepped away from their project for a good couple of weeks now, so do as I say, not as I do. I find that even if I have a schedule, it can be hard to just sit in front of a computer and write. I know from doing NaNoWriMo this past year that I can pound out about 1,500 words in an hour and a half. That's really not that long, but it's hard to sit down and start doing it, to set aside that hour and a half and just write, especially when there's YouTube, there's Netflix, there's pretty much anything else you could possibly think of in that moment that looks really attractive, more attractive than sitting down to write. I especially have trouble with the discipline part of writing. I have set goals for myself, but it's hard to stick to them when you're not accountable to anyone. I thought NaNoWriMo was great for me. I actually ended up winning because I felt accountable to someone other than myself. I knew that nobody else on the NaNoWriMo website cared what my word count was. They weren't going to judge me. They weren't going to look at my word count every day and say, oh, she's behind. But it felt like they were, even if I knew that they weren't. And it kept me accountable to someone else. And so I thought, you know, I'll keep setting myself a word count for each month and hopefully I'll keep myself accountable. And I haven't. I'll admit it, I haven't. I had planned for the month of February to write 1,000 words every day or end up with 28,000 words for the month if there was a day where I just couldn't write for whatever reason. And I'll admit that I probably have written less than 5,000 words for this month. And I feel terrible about it. But that's where the discipline comes in. I obviously don't have it. And if I want to write this story, I need to get it. I need to just sit my butt down in the chair and write. You can't always expect to be accountable to someone. The same type of discipline and dedication applies to athletes, applies to writers as well. You just have to reframe it. Of course, writing isn't going to get easier if you never practice. I mean, why would it? It's like anything else. And of course you're going to have those bad days where your brain is tired. Maybe you didn't get a good sleep. Maybe you're just having a bad day. Something's going on in your life. And that's okay. But you also need to realize that every day can't be like that. You have to be able to push past at some point and say, look, if I ever want this to be done, if I ever want to get anywhere, even just for myself, I need to sit down and push past that. You need to push past feeling bad, feeling down about your story, like maybe it's not going where you want it to or not progressing how fast you want it to. If you never write, it's never going to progress. Writing is hard, just like a lot of things. And you have to decide personally if it's worth pushing past that difficulty to get where you want to go. You have to decide if it's worth it. I know that for me, it is worth it. It's something that I've wanted to do for a long time. Right now is the perfect opportunity for me to do it. And I don't want to look back and realize that I completely squandered it. You just have to do it. And I know that's not really the advice a lot of people want to hear, but no one else can do it for you. You have to do it for yourself. So, my plan is to try to keep myself accountable to you. I hope to be doing these sort of writing vlogs, writing updates on a quite regular basis, and I hope to be able to update you with a new word count every time. I'm not sure what my word count is right this minute, but I'm somewhere around 72,000 words. And next time I see you for a writing vlog, for Writing with Lily, I hope to be somewhere beyond that. I don't know what my word count goal is going to be, but at this point, just about any progress is good progress. So I guess what the point of this is to say, don't feel bad and discouraged if you're not one of those people who can sit down and write huge amounts of words every single day. It's hard. Key points. Writing is hard. Motivation will only get you so far. Just like anything else, you have to be disciplined. People like to talk about when things go well, but they don't like to talk about when things go wrong or when they go hard. I guess that's about it. So I guess this turned into more of a rant than actual advice. I hope that this was somewhat helpful to you, even if I didn't give you any actual advice that you can act upon. It's something that I would find helpful, so I hope that you do too. I don't always find it the most helpful when all you ever hear is the perfect parts of someone's experience. Sure, the perfect parts are more fun to talk about, but they're not the most insightful for others who may be struggling. I also felt that it would be fun, since this is a book and writing channel, and to have a word of the day each time I do a video. So starting today, I guess not a word of the day since I won't be vlogging or doing videos every single day, but maybe a word of the week since I plan to post weekly. So the word of this week is obsequious. It's a word that means marked by or exhibiting a fawning attentiveness. I enjoy learning new words, and I think there are a ton of great words out there that you don't hear used all the time. I guess they're sort of those SAT words. I never thought that was particularly a troubling part of the SAT because I love words, and I love to be able to use words that you don't hear all of the time. Not in a pretentious manner, but just because I think that there are words out there that it's a shame that we don't use. So I hope that you enjoy learning a few new words with me. Thank you for watching Writing with Lily. I'll see you next time. Should probably be called Ranting with Lily. Ranting on writing? Might work. I guess that's good. Whatever. I don't know anything else to say.